Hey Defenders, welcome back. In this video, we are going to deploy a piece of our threat intel stack, and that is going to be MISP. MISP is a open source threat intelligence tool that serves as, you can think of it as like an indicator of compromised database. So it's storing malicious IP addresses, file hashes, domain names, we're able to use MISP to generate reports on particular APT groups or malware campaigns. So it's a super awesome tool when it comes to our threat intelligence. And with its robust API, we are able to integrate it with our SOC Fortress stack with ease. So in this video, we are going to actually install MISP ourselves. We are going to use Docker to do so, and we should be up and running within 5 minutes or less. So let's go ahead and jump into it. But very quickly, why are we bringing this into the stack? Well, as some of you guys may know, commercial threat intelligence feeds can become very expensive, and MISP is a great and free alternative to that. And we're not only able to ingest public feeds with MISP, we're also able to ingest some commercial feeds as well. So if there are some feeds you want to pay for, you can bring those in. We can also keep track of IoCs that are hitting our network in particular. And if we want, we can even share those out with other MISP instances. You can build a whole network of MISP servers that allow for sharing of based upon various tags. And it fits really well into our current stack because of its robust API. We are able to automate our threat intel lookups so that our SOC analysts aren't having to manually correlate, okay, I see this endpoint, made a DNS request out to evil.socfortress.co and manually have to look it up within MISP. We can automate that process so that the lookup happens on the fly, and then our SOC analysts are then alerted when a positive hit has been seen. MISP gives us a lot of features that I even myself haven't fully taken advantage of. Getting started with MISP is relatively easy, but I would say mastering it definitely takes some time and familiarity with the platform. So there are definitely other features that I probably haven't mentioned that you may be screaming at me, why aren't you talking about this, that I myself just may not know about at the moment. We're able to do more enrichment with MISP as well. So we can use MISP to build Yara rules, for example, against particular file hashes. We're able to integrate it with Cortex, which we'll get into in videos later down the road. And there's just a ton of stuff you can do with MISP that makes it a really awesome threat intel platform. So MISP is bundled up of what they call a LAMP stack, which is built upon a Linux operating system. Apache is going to serve as the web server. MySQL will be how MISP stores all of the IoCs and creates relationships between the data. And then PHP is the programming language under the hood that is bringing all of this together. So there are a few kind of complex dependencies. MISP does have some shell scripts that you can run as well that they provide, and they support Ubuntu 18.04, 20.04, and various versions of Red Hat. But in this demo, I am going to take advantage of what I think is the easiest way to get started with MISP, and that is via Docker. Xavier Merton, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, Xavier, if somehow you're watching this video, has put together a MISP Docker repo that we're going to take advantage of in this video. And this will get us up and running with Docker within like 5 minutes. It's super fast, which is awesome. So shout out to Xavier for putting this together. First, though, I do need to install Docker and Docker Compose and go ahead and get this started. So I'll copy the commands that I have in the Medium post here to go ahead and install Docker and Docker Compose. And if you're not familiar with Docker, there are a ton of videos online highlighting that talk about Docker and the architecture behind Docker and kind of the technology that's making it work under the hood. This is not that video, but Docker is really nice when it comes to deploying applications across really any base operating system that's can run Docker. So Ubuntu, Debian, your Red Hats, Windows as well, even. So it makes our deployment life super easy. All right, I'll go ahead and run an update, and we should be ready to now install. Now that we have the Docker repo all set up, I'll go ahead and paste my install command in here, and now we will reach out and install Docker and Docker Compose. All right, so that's looking good. I'll just go ahead and run a Docker hello world just to make sure that Docker is able to pull the image down and is able to run. And we should get this message here, hello from Docker. Okay, cool. So Docker is now running. Now that we have Docker, let's actually go ahead and clone the MISP Docker repo. So actually, I don't think I have Git. So if you don't have Git, make sure you install that with this command as well. Oh, actually, I did already have it. So I'll go ahead and I'll just throw this into op. So cd into op, and I'll run this git clone, and we should now have this misp-docker directory. So I'll go ahead and jump into there, and we'll see a few files here. So we see our Docker Compose file, which is what we will use to actually build the container, to build and then run our containers. The README, which is just the same as what's in the repo. We see our template.env file. So we actually want to copy this into just a regular .env. So this .env is going to hold our configuration options, such as where our MySQL server sits. In this instance, so this Docker Compose file will actually deploy a MySQL container as well. But if you do have a standalone MySQL server within your environment that you want to take advantage of, you can point to that here as well. We can then, if we scroll down, configure our admin password that we'll use to log into the web UI. I'll just overwrite that with please subscribe. The base URL, oops, I'll go ahead and change that to just misp.fortress.co. And then our data directory will be created when we build the containers as well. All right, when it comes to configuring, that's all we need to do. Let's now run it with a Docker Compose build. And so you can either install the Docker Compose binary, but if you're using the same steps I did, where you install the Docker Compose plugin via apt-get or whatever other package manager you're using, you'll probably just have to remove the dash in between and do a space in between. So I'll do Docker Compose build, the same directory where your Docker Compose.yaml file exists, because this command is going to need that in order to know what to actually build. So this is going to run. This will probably take a few minutes. It's basically building this for us on the fly, and that's what makes Docker really powerful, is that we're not having to worry about installing software or any other prereqs onto the base OS itself. We're going to run all that within a container. And so we'll be able to deploy this out to an Ubuntu box, a Red Hat box, without having to make sure that that base operating system has all of these packages already built in. These are going to be built into our Docker image. So I will let this finish off, and I will see you guys in a sec. And all right, so our containers have finished building. So now we are ready to start and run our container, which is going to deploy our MySQL container and then also our MISP container. So if I do a Docker PS, we see that no containers are currently running. But if I go ahead and run a Docker Compose up -d, our -d flag is going to tell Docker to run it in the background. We're now pulling the MySQL image down, and we see our MISP DB get created and our MISP_web get created. Now, if I do a Docker PS, let me expand this out so it's a little easier to read. We see our MISP container is running, and then we also see our MySQL container is also running. Both are in a healthy state, so that looks good. If we select our container ID and do a Docker logs -- follow, the logs within the MISP container at the moment. So we're seeing, okay, Apache started, Redis started, so that's looking good. And if we also do a netstat, so our server should be listening on 443. Did I comment? I might not have done that. I still do have 80. Okay, so I'm actually going to turn off MISP from listening on port 80 as well. And to do so, I'm going to open my Docker Compose file. and I'm just going to comment out port 80 here. So now MISP is only going to listen on 443. To actually implement this change, I need to bring down both the MISP and the MySQL container. So I'm going to go ahead and say docker compose down. And it's going to start that back up again. And let me make sure these are starting and look good. Okay. And if I do a netstat here to list on my listening ports, we see it's only listening on 443. So it looks good. So let's actually go ahead and connect to our MISP instance. So within my browser here, sockfortress.co. So we are now seeing, we are just using a self-signed cert. You can also mount a volume within your Docker Compose file where you upload your own certificate if you'd like as well, but you don't have to do that. MISP will generate a self-signed cert on the fly for you. So now we are getting our login. So if I go ahead and do, our username is going to be admin@admin.test, and then our password was please subscribe. Okay, so one thing I did actually just notice is that this password did not take. It was still just admin and admin. So remember, once you do log in, your first login, you will be asked to change your password, and you'll be able to set the password for your admin user that you want there. But your first login, I guess, will not take your password. I'll open up an issue on that GitHub and let them know about that. So if you're wondering why your initial password is not working at the start, go ahead and try admin and admin test, and then try the admin passphrase. And then, so here now I'll change my password to just please subscribe. Then I'll confirm with my current password of admin. Okay, so now our password has now been changed, and that's been reflected. So good. So we're able to log into MISP now. However, you will see that if we go to home, we don't actually have any events. And events are what are going to hold our indicators of compromise. So let's actually go ahead and first enable our feeds. And to populate and to gather events, MISP calls them feeds. So if we go under sync actions and select list feeds here, we're going to, you'll see we have 2 by default. However, there are a lot more than that. So what I can actually do is select our import feeds from JSON, and on the Medium post, I've linked to a JSON file. If I can grab that, there we go. That we will just be able to copy and paste into there. So I'll go ahead and select the raw, put that in my buffer, and then paste that there. Select add, and now you see we have a ton more feeds that we can actually enable. So we now have the feeds. So we have 69 new feeds. Nice. That we now need to actually enable these feeds now. So what I'm going to do is just select this checkbox here. We see them all checkbox here, and we'll see our enabled has an X still. So we'll go ahead and select enable selected. It'll ask us, are we sure? We'll say, yeah. Now we see that we have our checkbox here. So our feeds are now enabled. This isn't all of them though. You have to go through all of the pages. It's kind of annoying. You can't just like list them all, but whatever, is what it is. So for whatever feeds you do want to enable, just make sure that you go across all your pages here and enable them. But for this demonstration, I won't do that. I will just go ahead and now select fetch and store all feed data. So this is going to reach out to all of these feeds where we see these URLs here and collect events from these feeds. So you'll see after selecting that, we have pull queued for background execution. And if I go under administration and into jobs, we'll see our feeds now starting to kick off. So we see we fetched feed for feed number 3. Here we're doing it for feed 4, feed 5. So now that a few of these have completed, we should now have events start to come in. And sure enough, here we do. So if we go back to home, we see events start to come in. Here we see a feed of just Tor exit nodes. So if I actually select the feed ID, the event ID, and I will now be directed to this particular event. So here we get a little bit of description of the event itself. And then if we scroll down, we can actually see all of the IoCs that would be within this event. So here we see actual IP addresses of known Tor exit nodes. So we could say if all of a sudden we see an endpoint, one of our endpoints reaching out to one of these IP addresses and communicating with the Tor exit node, that would more than likely put us on high alert. And all of these IP addresses are now baked into this Tor exit node feed. So pretty cool. One caveat though is that our feeds here do not automatically update. We ran the feed one time. Now I would have to manually come in and actually go into our list feeds and then fetch and store all feed data again. And I don't want to do that. I'd have to do that every day, and I don't want to do that. I want to automate this process. They do advertise, where is that under? I think it's under server settings, scheduled tasks, maybe. Yeah, so I don't know. They have this, what they advertise, the scheduled tasks to initiate and pull all of the feeds. But I've tried playing around with this, and you can see like you can change your date to the next run and then select and then set your frequency in terms of hours and stuff. But it seems to be kind of flaky when I've tried it. So I actually go ahead and just do an API call. You can take it. There's an API endpoint that we can take advantage of to actually download new feeds daily, which is what I like to do. And I just then assign it to a cron job. So you'll see we have our curl command here that is just going to reach out to this API endpoint. What is it, a post or a put? It's a post. Yeah, so we make a post to this API endpoint. And that will tell MISP to re-download all of our enabled feeds so that we don't have to manually do that. And we can assign that to run once per day via a cron job. So let's actually first go ahead and set up our authorization key. So we need to go into MISP. I'll go into administration. I'll select list auth keys, and we're going to head and select add authentication key. For comment, you can say whatever. I'll just say automation. Allowed IPs. This would be a way for us to whitelist IP addresses to API keys. So say for example, I did 1.1.1.1 and 2.2.2.2 and an endpoint with an IP address of 2.2.2.2 made an API request to MISP and also provided the right API key, MISP would still deny it because it says, hey, you're not an allowed IP. So even if a foreign IP address has the right API key, we can still tighten it up even further by saying, hey, only these IP addresses are allowed to use this API key. I'm just going to go ahead and be lame and set it to 0.0.0.0, which is going to be any IP address. It also supports CIDR notations as well, so you can do a /0 to just say any IP address that uses this API key will be allowed. I will not say read only because I want it to be, because our request here is going to be a post. So we're not doing like a GET request, for example, that read only permissions would be fine. We're actually we're actually telling MISP to do something. And if we select read only, our API request would not work. So go ahead and select submit and make sure you copy down your API key. Once you select, I've noted down my API key, take me back now, you won't be able to retrieve the API key again. So do make sure you copy it and store it somewhere. I'm just going to throw it in Notepad here on the side. So I'll select that. We see, okay, all that looks good. Now, if I go onto my MISP box, let me actually copy this guy. And I'll throw that here and we can kind of clean that up here. So I'm going to go ahead and take my API key and replace it there. So looks good. And then the last thing we need to do is replace our MISP address. You can either point to the IP address or the domain name. I'm just going to go ahead and say, since I'm invoking this API call from the MISP box itself, I'm just going to go ahead and say localhost. So that looks good. I do have my insecure flag here because curl is going to complain because we are going over HTTPS that the certificate is a self-signed. So, but adding our -- insecure flag will tell curl to disregard that alert. So if I go ahead and copy that command. Let me go back into MISP and let's see how our jobs look like. Some of these are still going, but that's fine. I don't really feel like waiting for that to finish. So I'll go ahead and paste our command in there. And if we run it, we should get back our response. So here we see pull queued for background execution. So that looks good. Now, if we refresh, we'll probably see, yep, now we see all of our jobs restarting basically. So we are now starting to fetch from all of our feeds. So feed 22, 21, 23. And then what we'll go ahead and want to do is assign this to a cron job. So I'll go ahead and copy that. And actually, I'm going to copy that because that's my actually full command. Go ahead and open cron tab, add the time that I want it to run, which I think was 1, 2, 3. Yep. And I'll go ahead and add my comment there so I know what this is doing. So that looks good. So now once I save this, this cron job will make the API call out to MISP every day at 1 in the morning to say, hey, fetch your latest feeds. And that's it for this video. So again, it is super easy to get started with MISP. We will have more videos in the future, of course, going over MISP. As I mentioned earlier in this video, there's a ton of other features that you can get into and start exploring. We'll very soon integrate MISP with Graylog. So just how we took advantage of MISP API to automate the fetching of our feeds, we can also use the API key to run lookup requests from Graylog. So Graylog, like if we go back to our Tor exit nodes, for example, if one of our endpoints makes a network connection out to, let's say, this IP address, that will hit Graylog. Graylog will then strip out that value and make an API call to MISP and say, hey, do you have any events where this IP address exists? MISP will respond with either a yes or a no. And based upon that response, we'll be able to do more alerting and more enrichment, and which we'll tackle in later videos. So now that you have MISP up and running, go ahead and start exploring it on your own. And I appreciate you guys hanging out with me, and I will see you in the next one.